Welcome to Ryan's Running Reviews in partnership with Roadrunner Sports, and today we're taking a look at the Saucony Triumph 21. Let's run with it. Before we get started, I do want to say that these shoes were provided to me by Roadrunner Sports. However, no one had a chance to preview this video, and this file synopsis is my own. I'd also like to say please leave a like on the video and consider subscribing. Here we go. The Triumph series from Saucony is their max cushion neutral daily trainer designed to give runners plenty of stack height underfoot or just a very soft plush experience. Good for those longer runs or for runners that don't want to feel the ground whatsoever. If you want something a bit more traditional from Saucony, you can take a look at the Ride 16, which has a more firm base and a more classic feel. But again, for runners that want just a ton of cushion underfoot, that is where the Triumph line comes in. We saw a big redesign from the 19 to the 20, and then from the 20 here to the Triumph 21, we get a very small upgrade. It's primarily just an upper update with some small tweaks that we'll talk about here. As far as stats go for the Triumph 21, it costs $160 and does gain a little bit of weight. Last year it was 9.7, and then this year it comes in at 9.9 ounces, which is still pretty good for a max cushion shoe with this kind of materials. As far as stack height goes, same thing as last year. 37 in the heel, 27 in the forefoot for that 10 millimeter drop. Most Saucony shoes are kind of around the 8 millimeter drop, so if you want a little bit more, that's where the Triumph comes in with its, again, 10 millimeter drop. Moving on to the upper, where all the changes took place. Last year, it was an engineered mesh. This year, it is a flat knit upper on the Triumph 21. There's also one other change you really can't see from the outside, and it's the fact that Saucony added an internal engineered mesh liner, making the tongue fully gusseted. Last year, it was just partially gusseted with a strip of fabric on the lateral and medial side to keep the tongue in place. So we now have 2 layers of fabric on the upper here in the Triumph 21. There's also a small change to the lacing system. If you go to the top, you'll see there's a small kind of ribbon cable, if you will. It's much thinner and much more minimal compared to what we saw last year. Same kind of change took place on the Ride from the 15 to the 16. For whatever reason, they think this smaller ribbon cable works better. Personally, I didn't really use it or notice it. You kind of slightly feel it when you're tying laces, but once you're running, it just kind of fades away, and I don't think it really adds that much value. But it's okay because the lockdown was solid, and as long as they don't mess up a solid lockdown and fit, which is most of the time the case with Saucony running shoes, I'm quite happy with it. The other thing is, yes, the tongue is fully gusseted. That is a change, but it's a more squared off tongue and feels like a little bit less padding, just kind of a smidge towards the more minimal side of things. It feels identical almost to what we see on the Ride 16. It seems like Saucony is kind of updating the kind of consistent themes through the running shoe line. Works quite well. I don't think the difference was that massive. Yes, it's a little bit less padding, but it feels very familiar to what we saw last year. Moving to the back of this shoe, it looks like they made a small change to the Achilles section. It's a bit more squared off. It's more U-shaped and less V-shaped. So it didn't make a huge difference for me, but comparing the two shoes, I kind of noticed they changed the Achilles section just a bit. The heel counter is still incredibly stiff and provides an excellent lockdown. Didn't have any heel lift. And they did change the pull tab to a string, which is much easier to get your finger under instead of the elastic band we saw last year. Overall, the shoe fits true to size, incredibly comfortable. It's not too big, not too small, kind of in that sweet spot, and the lockdown is superb. I think Saucony typically does a good job of kind of nailing their uppers. The only Saucony upper I haven't liked a whole lot was on the Kinvara. It just felt a little bit off to me, but here on the Triumph, they've kind of continued their theme of excellence, just a solid fit overall. The midsole is still the same as last year. It is PWRRUN Plus, and if you're not familiar with Saucony's midsole or foam compounds, I'll give you a quick rundown. They have PWRRUN in EVA-based material, which we see on the Ride 16, PWRRUN Plus, which you see here on the Triumph 21, a TPU material, and then they have PWRRUN PB, which is a P-Bax, very light and bouncy foam, which you see like on the Speed 3, Pro 3, and some of their more high-end performance models. And just like last year, we still have the PWRRUN Plus insert, which I think is kind of funny because the entire midsole is already PWRRUN Plus. So we have PWRRUN Plus on top of more PWRRUN Plus. Didn't really absolutely notice it a whole ton, I think just because the entire experience is pretty consistent. It's already an extremely cushioned shoe, but if you want to kind of level up maybe some of your other shoes, you can take this insert out or swap them or just kind of customize your experience. Again, for me personally, didn't notice it a whole lot, but I think it's kind of a nice option if you want to swap it out for something that's a little bit lighter, a little bit more minimal, or if you want to maybe make your other shoes a bit more cushioned, you can use that or this new PWRRUN Plus insert as well. The midsole geometry also has a very noticeable rocker sensation, which I think is quite helpful. You don't feel like you get lost in this very large, thick slab of PWRRUN Plus. They also added something called contouring, where your foot sits lower in the foam itself, helping you connect to the shoe and then giving you additional stability for this rather large option. The PWRRUN Plus midsole provides a rather dense max cushion experience. It's by no means a firm ride, but it's not overly soft either. Sometimes when you have shoes this large, it's a bit difficult to pick up the pace in, and I think this does a decent job of becoming a bit faster. It's by no means a super fast shoe. It doesn't really compete with something like the Speed 3, but for having such a large midsole, I was kind of surprised at the fact I was able to kind of pick up the pace if I wanted, mainly because the midsole wasn't overly soft and gave me a solid amount of energy return. Moving on to the outsole, we have the same thing as last year, a ton of rubber coverage here. This shoe is really designed to kind of eat up miles and just be that workhorse daily trainer. I thought the traction was solid, didn't really have any issues, and it's nice to see some shoe brands keeping plenty of rubber coverage on their workhorse models. Now, this is less rubber than we saw on the Triumph 19, but I think it's a nice balance of not making the shoe too heavy, but also not sacrificing the quality and longevity of the shoe itself. When it comes down to it, the Triumph 21 is basically just an upper update versus last year's Triumph 20. They changed the material, they changed the small ribbon cable at the top, they changed the tongue, they added that internal liner, and then some small adjustments to the heel counter. But all that to say, it feels very, very similar. When I tried one on each foot, it's kind of hard to tell the difference, and that's because of the midsole, as it is exactly the same. And speaking of the midsole, I really do like PWRRUN Plus, especially when compared to EVA-based foams. It's a bit more lively, a bit more durable, and just feels more fun underfoot. And at 9.9 ounces, I think this is a solid option. It's not too heavy, and it's definitely not too light. I think it kind of walks that balance, especially because you have plenty of rubber on the outsole and a lot of solid premium materials in such a large, well-cushioned shoe. This should last you quite a while. Now, I will say, as far as negatives go, I think this is a great shoe. It's a great option, but if you want something faster, something maybe a bit more exciting, like maybe with a plate, or if you want a lighter, bouncier foam, I mean, that's maybe where you take a look at like the Speed 3 or maybe even the Pro 3, as those really do have a bit more aggressive midsoles with their plates and PWRRUN PB foam, which is a P-back-based material compared to the TPU-based material we see here in the Triumph. But overall, I think this is another solid winner from Saucony. They didn't change too much, and I'm probably going to say they're going to redesign the Triumph 22. So I'm excited to see what that looks like. Well, I'm Ryan from Ryan's Running Reviews, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.